today and I welcome you to the third lesson of our course Java Basics. In the last lesson we downloaded and installed JDK and how to use them. So let's begin. Before we move to variables, let's have a little flashback into the previous lesson. At the end of the previous lesson, we created a class with main method in it. In main method, we wrote this line of code. This line of code sent the text we typed to the output, which is the console. To fully understand this command, we would have to know about object-oriented programming in Java, but we will discuss basics of object-oriented programming in Java at the end of this course. So, all you need to know now is that system is a class that can handle input and output of a console. Class is a collection of methods, and methods, or we can call them functions, are just blocks of code that is doing something. Method can be called on a class and can have 0 or more input parameters. To call a method on a class, we have to write a class name, then dot, and then the method name with its parameters. If method doesn't have any parameters, we still have to write the brackets and leave them empty because they are mandatory. So, in our line of code, what we are doing is that we are calling a method called println. ln stands for line. So we are calling a method called printLine with one parameter. The parameter is the text we want to write out. And we are calling this method on a class system. .out is there because we want to work with the output. If we wanted to work with the input, there would be .in instead. So, method println has a code inside that will somehow write out the text to the console, and now we don't care how. So, that was a little explanation of the line of code we wrote in the previous lesson, and now let's get to the variables. Variables in programming are the same thing as variables in mathematics. We can store into them some value. Well, it's not exactly the same, because in programming we can store a lot of data types to variable, not only the numbers. In programming, we are not saving variables onto the paper, but to the memory of a PC. So, when we are working with variables, we are writing to a memory or reading from it. This place in a memory has firmly bounded size according to the data type that we are saving into it. For example, integer can be greater than this number you see. The most common data types are integer, which is a whole number, float, which is a decimal number, date, and string, which is some text. Java is a static typed language. That means that we always have to specify data type of a variable. Once data type is specified, it can't be changed. Other languages that are static typed are C, C++, Scala, and some more. The second type of programming languages is dynamic type languages. In these languages, we don't have to declare a data type of a variable. Of course, variable has data type, but the language will recognize the data type when we store a value to the variable. Data type of a variable in these languages can be changed during the run of a program. Examples of dynamically typed languages are Python, PHP, and JavaScript. So, before we can work with a variable in our code, we have to declare it. Declare means that we have to tell Java the name of our variable and also the data type of our variable. Based on this information, Java will prepare the place in a memory for our variable. Once the variable is declared, we can read it, work with it, and also rewrite it. We can declare variables in two different ways. First way is that we declare a variable only with a name. In this first case, we write data type of a variable first, then a name of a variable, and then of course a semicolon, because every command in Java has to end with a semicolon. This way of declaration is used when we don't know what value the variable will have and it will be computed somewhere later in a program. The second way to declare a variable is that we also specify its value. In this case, we write it like this, with equal sign. This was the way how to declare integers. When we want to declare a floating point number, we have to use double or float. These two are the same, except that double is represented by 64 bits in a memory and float by only 32 bits. As a default, Java stores floating point numbers as a double. When we want to save it by smaller numbers, I mean numbers to 2.3 by 10 to the 12. And finally, the string declaration is written like this. We write string with capital S because it's a class, but don't worry about this now. We have to write the text we want to store to the variable in quotation marks. Quotation marks will tell Java that this text is just a text and not some of Java's special commands. So, enough talking for now, and let's write some code. Open your Eclipse and let's create some variables. We will be typing to the main method as we did in the previous lesson. Because Java is a static typed language, we have to declare a data type of our variables. When we declare a variable, we write a data type first and then a name. So let's create an integer variable first and write it out to the console. So type int equals, I don't know, 5. And don't forget the semicolon, because every command in Java have to end with the semicolon. Then press enter, and now we want to write out our variable a to the console. We already know what line of code we need to write out the text to the console. It's system.out.println. This line of code is a little bit long to write, and because of it, in Eclipse there is a predefined shortcut to write it. If you write out, like system out, and then press Ctrl plus space, it should expand to system.out.println. Till now, we used this command to write out only the text, but we can also use it to write out a number. We can do it because the method println text gives the variable name a as a parameter to the function println. So type a, then Ctrl plus S to save our changes in the code, and then click on the play button. And we see that the value of a is written down here in the console. That was the integers, the whole numbers. If we want to work with decimal numbers, we can't use integers. If we try to save decimal number to the integer variable like this, int b equals 3.5, Eclipse will give us this warning. And when we try to run this code, Eclipse will give us another warning, and if we click on the proceed button, Eclipse will give us this error. So we can't use integers. What we can use is double or float. So redeclare our variable from integer to double, and create another variable with data type float, c equals 2.6. This will give us another warning. That's because by default, Java is saving every decimal number as a double. So when we want to save decimal number at the f, we run it, and we see that our variables b and c are successfully written out in the console. So that was double and float, and now, as the last thing for this lesson, let's create a string variable. So write string, and don't forget that string is a class, so it has to be written with the capital S. So string text equals, and we already know that when we are declaring a string, its value has to be written in quotation marks. So in quotation marks, write some text. Hello guys, how are you? Then enter, write south, control plus space to system out print ln, then in the brackets write text, save our code, and then click on the play button, and we see that the text is written down here alongside with the numbers. So guys, that will be all for today, and in the next lesson we will talk about basic operators in Java. See you next time.